Ponca City School Board to order, and we start with the flag salute.
Please pray with me. We, as always, want to thank you for all of the blessings that you bestow on us. We want to thank you for our students. If it was not for them, our lives as educators would not exist. Our hearts would have an empty hole yet to fill. Our lives would be missing the joy of seeing a light come on when the student figures out what X really equals. And our internal mission to nurture and love a child so they may grow up to be a good, productive adult in society would not exist. We thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Please be with us as we travel to attend family gatherings for the holiday season. Thanksgiving is a special time for families to give thanks for all of their blessings. Please help those who do not have a family to go to or those who struggle to have any food at all. And lastly, help our men and women of the armed forces. Please protect them and keep them safe. We also want to thank our veterans, past, present, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. We ask this in your name. Amen.
1.3, roll call.
Mr. Clark?
Present.
Dr. Kincaid?
Here.
Mr. Newsom? Mr. Riley?
Here.
Mrs. Troop?
Present. Okay. Presentation and recognitions. 2.1, presentation of Employee of the Month and the Friends of Education's Award. The Certified Employee of the Month is Christy Myers, a language arts teacher at East Middle School. Is Christy here?
I'm very honored to be the principal that gets to give you this award because it is very, very well deserved. This is what your peers said about you. Christy is always going above and beyond the regular duties of a teacher. She arrives to school early and stays very late on most days, and she still does a lot of work from home. She is both the Language Arts Department chairperson and the Champions team leader. As the ELA department chairperson, she's very organized and efficient. She always has an agenda ready for the meeting each week and then takes notes during the meetings and then sends the notes to each member. She coordinates the curriculum maps, data collection, and keeps everything neat and organized in a binder. On top of that, she takes the time to make little gifts to show her appreciation for all of the people she works with. It's my honor to give this to you. Congratulations.
Okay, next, Support Employee of the Month, and that's Andrea Burris, Special Education Paraprofessional at Ponca City High School.
I'm a teacher, I don't really need this. Andrea Burris is so much more than just a teacher assistant at Pohai. She is a very important part of our family, and we have family at Pohai. She works in the severe and profound classroom that I teach and in this special ed department. She is a compassionate and loyal assistant who helps with some of our students who need the help most. She's patient and empathetic. She always wants what's best for the students. She never shies away from assisting where she's needed, and trust me, not everything is pleasant. But she loves her student that she works with, but still has plenty to spread around. The students adore her, as do the teachers and other assistants that work with her, probably because she always has that smile on her face and praise in her heart. Additionally, she's involved with other students at our school, including being a faithful fan of the football and volleyball. She takes pictures and shares them with the school's organizations. We always have good pictures for yearbook. She's very much appreciated by the staff and clients of the Opportunity Center, where she volunteers with activities from the Cherokee Strip class and she is an outstanding example of the quality staff that we have at Ponca City High School.
Okay, next is Friends of Education. Sherry Keene, a volunteer at Woodlands Elementary.
Woodlands Elementary School is delighted that Sherry Keene is being recognized as the Friend of Education for November 2016. Without question, Mrs. Keene is very deserving of this award. Sherry began volunteering in the Woodlands Library when her grandchildren were students at the school. Even though her grandchildren graduated from Woodlands several years ago, every Wednesday afternoon you can find her working away in the library. Like most of Ponca City's elementary schools, Woodlands librarian travels to another school in the afternoons, leaving the library unattended. Volunteers like Mrs. Keene make sure library services continue even when our librarian cannot be at the school. Woodlands students are avid readers and they check out many books from the library. Mrs. Keene reshelves hundreds of books each week that students have read and returned. She also assists students in finding the perfect new book to read. When students are ready to check out books, regardless of whether there are a few students or an entire class, Mrs. Keene is happy to check the books out to them. She helps our students become better and more enthusiastic readers. Whether the library is packed with students or only has a few, Mrs. Keene always has a smile on her face and time to stop and chat with students and staff. She is genuinely interested in the events of people's lives and always provides an encouraging word. Thank you, Mrs. Keene, for being part of the Woodlands family. We're very proud to recognize you as the November 2016 Friend of Education for Ponca City Public Schools.
All of you award winners, Shelley would like to take a picture out in the hall. Next on the agenda is public comment, and since no one has requested to speak to the board, we're going to skip that part. Number 4, presentations and reports. The first one is 4.1, presentation on the concert hall project by Troy Lewis, or Richard Winterroad.
Hi. Actually, I'm going to give the presentation today. I'm going to show the pretty pictures, and you turn this on. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Anyway, thank you for having us. And previously, we've shown you the floor plans, kind of how it's laid out, but haven't been able to show you the exterior. But today, we'll finally get to do that. Our campus at Poe High is basically an architectural timeline. It's an amazing place. You can see throughout the years as different buildings are added to the campus, really you can see the different architecture of the period. The Howell building, everyone knows, was built in 1926, Spanish colonial, Spanish mission style. Has a lot of detail, a lot of ornamentation. It's a classical building. You'll notice the base and different features that we'll talk about later, but I just wanted to go through these buildings of the campus. A lot of detail. What's that? Oh. Well, you showed me how to do that, and then I didn't do it. There we go. Okay. A lot of detail in classical buildings. As you go along in future buildings, this was built in 1930. This is the old field house. Also a very classical building, a lot of detail, ornamentation. When we get into the 50s, like the cafeteria and the Anderson building, everything was stripped away. It became what's called a modern building, and still have some of the same characteristics of a base and a shaft, but there's no detail, no ornamentation. They strip those away, and they start to have lots of glass on the walls, large openings instead of small openings. Here, the Anderson building has a little bit of curtain wall in the end. Then we had the Fine Arts, which was built in the 70s, same time the Robson Fieldhouse was built. And this was going towards more common in the 70s, was a little more brutal architecture where it was just masses and small punched openings, lots of. And then in the 90s, we did the Math Science Business Building. Also in the 50s, the addition that was done on the back side of the Howell Building, you can see that first bump, and then to where we started our addition in the 90s. They chose to match the architecture of the 26 building, and almost identical duplication of all the cornice and the terracotta and the base and the plaster and materials and the forms. Almost everything about it's identical. The rest of the campus chose to be an expression of the time period. When we did this building, it was meant to be to blend with the campus material-wise, form-wise, color-wise, but also to be an expression of a building that might take us into the 21st century at the time, right before the turn of the century. And then we did the Robson Fieldhouse addition, and here we were able to get the same brick as the Fieldhouse, but we used a contrast brick color to give it interest, but still use some classical forms, but mainly it's stripped down to a more modern expression. Here's what the view will be from the building, looking back at the campus. And so all of those structures that are on the campus are seen, and we want this new structure to be part of the campus. One thing we did was to bring it very close to the street, and so trying to make it, be part of the campus. We want to do that as much as we can. This is on axis from in front of the Howe building, looking at the site. And that's where the new building will go. Here's the building in our what's called Revit model. This is what we design and do our working drawings from. And we've recreated the site, placing the trees where they are, and you can even see the parking lot. And you can see how we've pulled the building much closer to Overbrook to try to be a more cohesive campus. And we talked to you about that in the previous. Here's a perspective looking back at the new concert hall. You can see a little bit classical forms to mimic some of the expression that's found on the front of the building, but stripped down of the ornamentation to be a more modern building. A lot of glass. One of the programmatic elements of the building was to have a lot of glass at the lobby on the north side facing the campus, so you'd have unobstructed views of the campus from inside the lobby on both the first floor and the second floor. It wraps around on three sides of the front expression here. You'll notice that we put red at the entrances to mark the entrances. One thing that we've done extensively throughout the campus, and it's all based on the original Howe building, is the red terracotta roofs. And so you'll see an expression of red wherever entrances are. And I should have pointed that out when you saw all the pictures. This is perspective. You'll notice that there's a base around the bottom of the building, very similar to the rest of the structures. There's a shaft in the middle and then cornice at the top. The room, what we call the room, is the performance space. It's expressed above the buildings, the spaces below. And what we propose there is to use a ceramic tile that will hopefully give us a shimmer at night with the lights and also during the day, and will express the excitement that goes on inside the performance space itself. This is facing 5th Street, very similar also on 7th Street side, facing west and the east. And you can see from the left of the page, that's the side towards the campus. And you have the lobby with the 2-story glass. That's 26-foot tall curtain wall on the front of this building. It's a very large building. The room has a 50-foot ceiling in it, and so then there's an interstitial space above that, and so you're about 60 feet tall at the room. So it's a large structure. And so to bring it down to the scale of a person, we had to break it up with different elements, and some of those elements are the base of different materials. You can the materials we want to use, which were found on the campus, are brick, plaster, and for plaster we're going to use EIFS, which is exterior insulation finish system, which is a synthetic stucco, and then ceramic tile. Those are we've been told by Sooner Construction that fits in our budget, and we need to stick with those. The brick is actually going to be a thin brick, and so the whole exterior will be clad in durable materials, but also materials that are found on the rest of the campus in the same colors and textures and forms. And I don't know. This is from the front, looking from the campus back towards it. There's 2 stair towers, one on either side. That's a structure in the middle. Those become kind of a dominant form on the facade. And what they really do, in addition to being the stair towers, they signify the front of the building, which is a public space, and then there's a transitional space as you enter into the room, and then the rest of it's the back of house where the students and performers are. So you can see on this whole facade, it expresses what's going on inside of the building as well, as just being vertical transportation. Are there any questions? That's what we have to present for you today. Any feedback?
Still on schedule?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I got a question.
Okay.
25 years ago, when Pioneer Tech did their big expansion, they used a synthetic stucco on the outside, which was a nightmare. Tell me why this is a better synthetic stucco than that was.
Well, it was how many years ago you said?
Yeah. Are you telling me it's a better product than
Oh,
they
yeah.
had back then?
Definitely better product, better installation, better installers, more educated. And we use it in the right places. We don't use it everywhere. So.
I have a question. Is this going to have an elevator?
Yes, it will have an elevator. That bump on the front, it's centered in the lobby. And so as you come into the middle, you can either go up grand staircases on the inside. We'll come to you, the next presentation will show you in color what the interior looks like of both the lobby and the room, and you'll be able to see the grand staircases. But there's also vertical transportation. Now that we've added the 3rd level to get to our seating capacity, the elevator is very important to get it us up to the third level. And so it's situated in a good spot to hit all those floors, in addition to making your sound booth accessible. So that becomes an accessible program for your students, to all students. Well, there's no more questions, then I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Richard.
4.2, building assessment reviews. Lori Cox is going to be the first one. Going to tell us about Garfield.
Good evening.
Good evening.
There we go. There we go. All right. The presentation I have probably no more than about 6 or 7 minutes unless you have questions. I tried to leave enough time for questions, and we were limited to 10 minutes, so how long it is depends on your questions, I guess. But this year we were real proud that Garfield did bring their F up to a C minus. And so I wanted to start off with that slide because I'm very proud of and for my staff. They worked very hard, not just last year, but prior years that resulted in that. And then the next slide is going to show how they did that. And I wanted to look at our trend data. I went back and did 3 years because 2013-14 was the first year where all assessments were grouped together. They quit pulling out the special ed and quit letting them take that modified test. And so that's when we all had to become accountable for all students, not just our regular education students. So, and that was my first year at Garfield. And if you'll notice, we got 36% in third grade that year. Not real swift. We weren't real happy with that. We knew we had to make some changes because just barely over a third of our students were reading proficiently at the end of third grade. And then that year in fourth grade, they did better. A little over half of their students were proficient. And then, of course, coming down here into fifth grade, which has always been a strength for Garfield, was fifth grade coming in with 63%, or almost 2/3 of their students. But that only left us school-wide with only 49% of our students in third through fifth grade reading proficient. And that we just all know was not good enough.
Your slide switched on you and you're
Oh,
on the
goodness,
math-
let me
you're
go
on the math
back.
slide right now.
That's because I'm having to do with this and not up. That's the math. Thank you for noticing that and get used to this laptop. And now go back. I have to try not to tap that. So we had 36, 52, and 63, which gave us 52, which was 3 percentage points better than the math, but still not real great. So then we knew we had to make some changes. There were some teachers that left, replaced them with some new entry year teachers. We had a building in 2014-15. Every grade level had at least one entry year teacher, and third grade actually had a 1-year teacher and an entry year teacher. And our scores really did show it that year. That's also the year that we started our Literacy First grant. That was one of the things that was real important when I came on, is that I'd worked the Literacy First framework before as a teacher and administrator. I knew that when used with fidelity consistently, that it would help improve scores. And so I had the opportunity to apply for a grant for us at the beginning of 2014 that would pay for all of our teachers' training and would also have a consultant coming in every month, going through classrooms with me, helping me become a better literacy coach to my teachers, and also at the same time coaching them as well. That year, our third grade scores came up just a little bit, but we really dropped in fourth grade. And then fifth grade was 56%. That was the year that got us our F on our report card right there. And We can argue all day long how valid those report cards are, but I think all of us would agree, as I shared with my staff when we got it, when only 42% of your students are reading proficient, you can't hardly argue with the F on your report card. You just can't. So then came last year, and there are a lot of different things that came into play last year. It was our second year with Literacy First. I also got a full-time instructional coach, which was just a godsend, because it's one thing to see the needs of your staff. It's one thing to be everywhere you need to be and giving them the assistance they need and the feedback that they need and the coaching they need. And so I oftentimes told Terry in the 14-15 year, I felt like the little boy with his finger in the dike. I felt like every time I got one thing plugged, something else came up, and there just wasn't enough of me to go around. And so it was just a godsend last year when I got a very good, very effective instructional coach that was there full-time, Stacy Satry. And so she came alongside of me, and we were able to work together. Since my background is K through third primarily, and hers is in the upper elementary, we kind of split things up. And so we kind of divided and conquered, and I worked really hard with our lower elementary teachers, trying to get that rigor up and getting them ready, because you can't get them in third grade 2 and 3 years behind and expect to make them proficient. She's worked really hard in the upper elementary, and we overlap a lot, but that's kind of how we decided we would do it. We also implemented the Voyager intervention program with kindergarten through second last year, and the System 44 with third and fourth grade. And so as you can see, last year in third grade, 62% were proficient in reading, 53% in fourth grade, and 61% in fifth, which brought us up to 58%, which we know we've got to do better. We know that's not good enough, but that, that is 16% better than it was the year before. And the reason for the colors is I kind of wanted you guys to see if I can do it without changing my slide. Right here is what I thought was real important if you look at that trend. I wanted us to follow these third graders all the way through. And if you look at up in the far left-hand corner, you can see our third graders in 13-14, only 36% of them were proficient in reading. They fell down 10 percentile points, and so we lost ground. We had less children reading proficient in fourth grade than what did in third. That was a big issue. We made some personnel changes there because of that. And then I want to really brag on my fifth grade teachers. They grew them from 26% proficient to 61% proficient. And that's just what really good, effective instruction in the classroom will do for those boys and girls. And that was not only having a phenomenal career teacher, Denise Baldwin, in there, but a dynamite entry year teacher. And her scores were almost as high as Mrs. Baldwin. She's that committed, that good, and that coachable, and they just truly worked together as a team and really brought those kids up, and they really worked hard together. I also want to brag on the fourth grade team last year, because if you'll notice, when we go back to look where these students were in 14-15, they came up 12 percentile points. So then we grew our third graders and the fourth grade teachers grew them 12%. And so, you look at that, if we can get another 12% this year, we're bumping up at 65%, almost 2/3 of the students proficient. So if we can keep that growing trend, then we can keep that momentum going. And then same thing here, only this is math. We had a much bigger hill to climb with math. Math was much lower. And again, you'll notice the same issue. Third grade, 28%, and then when they moved to fourth grade, they went down. Again, that was not a good, effective team, so we made some personnel changes there. And then last year, fifth grade brought them up to 55%. But then look at that phenomenal growth in 14-15 in third grade, up to what they did in 15-16. That fourth grade team last year brought them from 18% of the students being proficient in math to 51% of the students being proficient in math. I mean, that's just phenomenal growth, and those two worked very hard together and very well together. And really, it is the growth. It wasn't the overall proficiency last year that got us our C-. It was actually the growth our students made from third to fourth and fourth to fifth. So to keep that score and actually keep it growing, we've got to work really hard this year at Garfield on improving our proficiency. We're going in the right direction now, but we still have a long ways to go, and we still have to keep them growing in the right direction. Any questions so far?
What about the kids' changes each year? I mean, do you lose them? I mean, how many kids of those third graders, when they started all the way to the fifth grade, is there a lot of different numbers of kids? I mean, did you lose some each year, or did you gain some, or it's all the same?
You mean
kids?
like as far as the kids, students themselves, did we have turnover? Not a whole lot. I mean, when you look at the data, I was surprised. I mean, Garfield had the highest transient rate out of all the elementary schools last year, but that was probably, 25%? So we were keeping 75% of our students. So yes and no. And a lot of those students are considered transient, but they go back and forth. I mean, I've got lots of students that I share with Liz that we get back and forth. And also Roosevelt. We seem to have a lot of movement between Garfield and Roosevelt, and Garfield and Lincoln, and a few with Union. But even for our students that we get, we're usually sharing them with other elementaries, and depending on which family member they happen to be living with, then they may go to Garfield for 6 months, and then they may end up over with Liz for the last 3 months, or vice versa. So, and some of the kids, we had them in third, we lost them in fourth, and we got them back in fifth. You just never, you just never know. So. Okay, this is one of the things that Terry asked me. She said, I think you should share this because we're supposed to share, some of the good things that are going on and what's been effective and worked. And we have in our instructional coaches room, where only staff is allowed, teachers in administration, we have data walls. And on the data wall, when we assess at the beginning of the year, it used to be with maps. Now it's our STAR. And this is our reading, our STAR literacy. And depending on what level they are, it's hard to see these sticky notes because I couldn't get the real pretty bright ones this year. But if they started out in green, they're in tier 1, and that means that they are considered proficient. And the second tier, the tier in the middle, is tier 2. Let's see if I can do that without changing it. This tier right here is tier 2. Those are the kids that are slightly behind, but they're a year or less behind. And we color code them, and we put all their stickies in the middle, and we code it yellow. And then our bottom tier, those are children that are scoring in the bottom 25%. And they come in at the beginning of the year that way. And so they're color coded. And the reason why we color code them is we want to track them. And each of these sticky notes has a student's name on it because we want to personally be able to put our hands on that student and physically see that Bobby Joe or Sally Sue or whoever is moving up or down or not moving at all. And so we move them as we track and as we progress monitor. We move them up or down the wall, and it helps us track our progress with our students and whether or not we're moving them, because we want them all pushed up. And one of the biggest things we're still battling is, if you'll notice, we still start out with a lot of children in the bottom quartile. And that's what really hurts us. And the biggest thing the research says is that to get less children in that bottom quartile is you've got to have more rigorous instruction in Tier 1, and that's the instruction all students receive. So that's one thing we are continuing to work on at Garfield, is to make our instruction rigorous enough for the students in each of their grade levels. And it's kind of a delicate balancing act, because when they're coming in behind, you've got to push them up there and get them where they need to be. And so we have one for reading, And then we have one for math. And actually, our math wall looks better than our reading wall this year. We've done a lot to try to improve that math because it was behind, and we really seem to be seeing a pretty big bump with that. We don't normally see a lot of movement in our data walls until we kind of get around Christmas time. As we get towards the end of that first semester, that's when we really start seeing a lot more movement. So, any questions about that? Okay, continuing to grow and improve at Garfield. This year, taking a leadership team of teachers from our leadership team to go learn about our professional learning communities and how to make those work for math. We're really good at doing that and targeting that in reading. We're not quite as good at it in math, so we're attending a training that will help us learn how to do that in taking 3 teachers on staff. So then they can come back and share that with staff members, and we'll actually have that in a SIM meeting for the rest of the teachers. Implementing instructional rounds with teachers, observing each other. That's something the district used to do that I was surprised that when it fell away, that's some feedback I've gotten from my teachers is that they want that. They want to do that. In other words, I don't think it needs to be a district initiative, but the teachers really want to learn from each other. And so we're going to do that. Continue to use our PLC process to help teachers focus on how to best address students' academic needs using data gathered from our CFAs, our benchmarks and progress monitoring for math and reading. We have a whole lot of data now, and we need to be looking at all of it and making decisions based on that data. Continue instructional rounds with our consultants. We've got to still have a consultant from Literacy First. We lost our grant because when the state funding was cut and C3 grants were cut, we lost that. But I was able with school improvement money and Title I money to be able to, I couldn't afford them every month, but we could afford 4 visits from him. And so he'll be coming still with the Literacy First to ensure we don't have that fade away, continuing with the Literacy First training and funding that out of my Title I and budget. The only hard thing about that is with the budget cuts, there's not as many trainings. So I am having difficult finding the trainings that I've set aside funds for. And then continue to provide teachers with training and tools needed to ensure fidelity in that continued implementation of Literacy First framework. And then continue to improve reading interventions. In tiers 2 and 3, we have the System 44 that the board agreed to fund last year, and we are continuing with that. And I also was able to bring in a consultant for that this year to continue the training for the teachers so they can hone those skills with that. And then the state also provides a consultant with our Voyager intervention, which the state got that through a federal grant, so those funds weren't touched. And so that is what we're doing to continue our momentum to improve and grow at Garfield. And then one of our favorite mottos at Garfield is, on our worst day on the job, we are still some child's best hope. And that is from Larry Bell, and he came and did a professional development for us last year. And so that is my presentation. Are there any questions?
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a comment and then a compliment. It's obvious from your first set of slides that the value of a quality instructor will do in the classroom. Your 3rd to 4th grade is that's just remarkable. Either it was real bad to start with or real good to end up with, but one way or the other, it shows the value of a good teacher. The other thing, and you didn't cover it, but I want to give you and your staff a compliment. On the raw data scores for the A to F, Garfield had a 26% improvement, and that was by far the largest of any of our schools. So that shows that good work's been getting done there at Garfield.
Thank you. We
You're welcome.
appreciate that. Thank you.